How's it going, everybody? Hope you all got to watch my third eye reaction. Thought it came out pretty well. Really interesting subject, and that's why we're talking about it. I only have about an hour because I am going to eat some boomers tonight, and I have a timeline for that. So, just wanted to pop on and talk a little bit about the consciousness raising aspect of psychedelic music and why these bands that have an association with certain type of occult practices tend to be so uncannily powerful. And I'm going to shine a light on a lot of mysteries. So hopefully we can get through a good bit of it in the hour that I have. But I just have so many stories about this and so much to say about it that it may require a couple of parts, because this is obviously a major part of my life. It's something that, yeah, I mean, I basically lived for it for a number of years, trying to get back there. But basically, the crux of it is that if you look at the greatest bands that have lasted throughout the decades, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, the Grateful Dead, probably especially the Grateful Dead, considering the lack of radio hits and the star of the band has been dead for over 30 years and they still fill football stadiums. I mean, it's completely ridiculous. I think they're actually Dead and Company was down to 2 original members and they're still filling football stadiums. So obviously, it really struck a chord with people very, very deeply. And I think a lot of people on the outside of that don't really understand why. Another band that has a very similar kind of reputation and a very similar energy, although this will surprise some people that don't get it yet, is Tool. And I'm actually lucky enough to have discussed exactly this with Danny Carey and to ask him if he was aware of what it is that I'm talking about when I say that the Grateful Dead and Tool had the same energy. And he absolutely, definitely did. So that was a really good bit of confirmation that, they're aware of this thing that I felt like I had tapped into. And, people sense it, but I think it's like not as common that people can articulate it or that they maybe dedicate their lives to figuring out what the hell it is. And so it's probably best to start with the Grateful Dead because they were really sort of the progenitors of this whole idea that you can use psychedelics to short circuit the filtration system in our consciousness and our nervous system that gives us the illusory sense of having an individual vantage point from which to view the universe, which is an absurdly narrow and limited way to have to, try to understand something so massive. But yeah, so the psychedelics take down these filters to varying degrees, and I think it's a spectrum. So different psychedelics can affect different parts of the spectrum, and that's why there are these overwhelming similarities with the basic visuals that you get, like the wispy energy sort of color lines with little patterns inside. Everyone sees them. Everyone. And I know that everyone sees them the same way because we have graphic artists now that are capable of reproducing them. So that also all suggests that there's something that's actually there, which supports this idea that what you're actually doing when you take psychedelics is sort of temporarily allowing the parameters of your perception to expand so that you can actually perceive more of the universe. And it's also true that we perceive less than 1% of the full spectrum of light. And then there are all types of other types of radiation and, God only knows what that we're unable to perceive. Dark matter we can't see. We're perceiving a tiny little bit of what is actually there. And then, so many of us are so presumptuous as to basically think that they have it figured out, and I mean that in the limited sense. The abject materialist, that whole trip, those guys tend to be pretty arrogant as a general rule in terms of, their belief that they understand what the universe is. And there's no more to it than meets the eye. That's an absolutely insane thing to believe, almost as insane as believing that you have the correct religion. right? You're absolutely positive of that. Uh, so at any rate, what the Grateful Dead figured out very early on, and this was in large part due to the influence of a guy named um, Augustus Stanley Owsley III. He designed the Grateful Dead's early sound system, and he also kind of conceived of this idea that people could create a unified field of consciousness and that they could basically become avatars for this greater mind. And that was the basic premise of the Grateful Dead's music. And that's why these 20-minute improvisations would sometimes coagulate into, highly ordered, extremely sophisticated, nearly impossible to reproduce, these transcendental moments. They also were made aware of this phenomenon by listening to North Indian music, because it has the same kind of gestalt, I guess, where the, the improvisers, and you have to be improvising. This doesn't happen so much with music that is performed the same way every time. Even Tool, when they perform live, will put some improvisational segments into certain songs, like Schism is one that comes to mind immediately. And it makes the music so much more powerful, because what happens when these musicians, no matter who they are, improvise themselves into this trance state, and they connect with what the Grateful Dead called it, with a capital I. They said they never figured out what they thought it was. They couldn't make it happen. And you can't do it deliberately. I totally agree with that it's sort of just is there or it's not, and there's not a goddamn thing you can do about it to make it show up. It's a really remarkable experience to channel this thing, I guess, whatever it is. I tend to just think of it as the universal mind. But when this thing arrives, and this sort of reinforces the idea that it is some sort of, spiritual power, because it has an effect on people that is basically the same. When those transcendental moments are reached, there's an energy that flows out from the stage and out from the speakers and into the audience, and it changes people. It generally tends to make them more enlightened, enlightenment, in my view, being something that is also on a spectrum like every other thing in the universe. So, we're not talking about perfection achieved in the audience of a Phish concert or whatever. But there is, to those who are able to receive it, that have the capacity and are open to it, an ability to entrain with the consciousness of the musicians on the stage, and they are actually raised up to the level of those people. And some of them are able to retain this. I first became aware of this at a Grateful Dead concert. It was after Jerry Garcia died, but it was the other ones. And I wasn't expecting much at all. I didn't really even want to go. I just kind of thought, well, these washed up hippies, this is going to be stupid. And that was my first real experience of this group mind phenomena and these charges of energy that are released at the climaxes of these improvisational sections. It was really almost too much to believe. In fact, at one point, I decided that I had to get away from the music and put some distance between myself and the stage, because some random person had come up and given us front row tickets because they wanted to be able to smoke cigarettes and they couldn't up there. And so I got too close to it, and it was too weird and powerful. So I needed to go away and think about it. So I walked up. There was this big. It was in a bowl. So there's this big rim that wrapped around the Nissan Pavilion, I think it was, on the East Coast. And I had mentioned that I was going to one of my little brother's friends who was, total goth, Marilyn Manson, black fingernails, that whole thing. And I thought for sure there's no way this kid is actually going to go. Like, why would he, And I'm walking around the rim as he's walking around the rim, and we meet exactly in the middle, and we're the only two people that have done this. It was just mind-boggling, and this is what happens when you attenuate yourself to this energy. A lot of people report this kind of experience when they smoke DMT or drink ayahuasca, that experiences of synchronicity, precognition, telepathy, all this sort of stuff increase dramatically. Daniel Pinchbeck called it an occult hangover. And it really gets to some people. People think that they have broke their brain because they're expecting to just get high and then go back to normal. And when that doesn't happen, they think there's something wrong with them. When, in point of fact, it's just that they have actually expanded their consciousness. And if you don't believe in that, and you don't, a lot of people are trying to expand their consciousness, but they don't even think, like, what does that actually mean? What's going to happen if I'm successful? People don't think that far ahead in a lot of cases. So at any rate, I go up there and he's having the same reaction as me. Like, what the fuck is this? I think were his exact words. And, we kind of talked about it for a minute. Let me try to fix this strobe. I don't know why this is happening. The last 2 streams, it has happened. So, yeah, I go back down into the audience, and this is when I become aware of the group mind. Very, very profoundly. First of all, I was tripping, of course, but I sat down in the grass, and it was the song "Scarlet Begonias," which I had never heard before in my life, and there was like this white light coming out of the music, and I just sat down, and I just thought, man, of all the places to find something this extraordinary, the washed up members of the Grateful Dead. And the second I had that thought, they sang from the stage, "Sometimes you get shown the light in the strangest of places if you look at it right." I was already having a hard enough time without the band responding directly to my thoughts. And this continued. And the next time that it happened, I was really starting to understand that somehow this music and maybe the psychedelics were connecting the consciousness of the people in the audience and the band in a way that was highly unusual. And so when I thought we're all experiencing all these weird, bursts of energy and all these like surreal improvisations, and I looked around and noticed that everyone had the same look on their face, and they sang again, "Can't look at you without looking at me," talking a lot about less and less and forgetting the love we bring. And so it happened again, and this is like standard fare for these type of concerts. That's why they were so powerful. They demonstrated for people the reality of the collective mind. God damn it, I almost just want to turn this thing off so this doesn't keep happening. It is the only one that is available in this part of the jungle. It's the second one that I've purchased, and I guess they're all just garbage. So I'm just going to leave it off because that's really distracting, and I'm still going to continue to wear my sunglasses. Okay, so that's the basic idea behind, what made the Grateful Dead so powerful. Like, why in 1987 to 1995, were they packing football stadiums so densely that people were passing out with nowhere to fall over, with another 40,000 people out in the parking lot? What in the hell's going on? And people used to say, oh, it's just the drugs. But I hate to break this to you, but people do drugs at every concert I've ever been to. It's got nothing to, it has something to do with it. And one of the reasons I think it's important is that our mind, you are literally using more of your brain to the extent that there's electrical activity in parts of your brain where there never normally is any when you take psychedelics. So you're literally engaging parts of your brain that don't do anything most of the time. And we're talking, these have been compared to brain scans of like master meditating monks, and they don't have this. So this is another thing that, when people say, well, you should be able to do it without psychedelics. Well, then fly to the moon without a spaceship, dummy. You know what I mean? It's just technology. And no, you need technology to do certain things that you're not naturally capable of. That's what technology is for. And on top of that, you have 100 times the neurogenesis and neuroplasticity that you do in your normal state. So your brain is actually building itself very rapidly. And you can learn a lot faster. There is a point of diminishing returns where if you have taken too many psychedelics or too high of a dose, it actually reverses the process and neurogenesis decreases, and you're going to have some, less neurogenesis than normal. And I think it's around the neighborhood of a heroic dose of psilocybin. So by the way, if you're looking to get these benefits from psychedelic compounds, do not take massive doses, take moderate doses, not microdosing either, but 100 to 200 micrograms of LSD is going to put you right in that sweet spot for neurogenesis and enhanced neural plasticity. And so this tale gets a little bit weirder. In fact, it gets a lot weirder because there are these legends about the Grateful Dead being able to influence the weather. And I believe them when they say that it wasn't deliberate. And my theory about this is that when you had all of these people in this altered state, and they were all tuned in to the same frequency, they're all on the same page. That is the reason the weather's being influenced. And there are a couple of really famous instances of this. One was in Sam Boyd Silverdome in Las Vegas in 1992. It was the middle of monsoon season, and it had been raining for like a week. And the Grateful Dead come out and went into Here Comes Sunshine. And I've talked to crazy numbers of people over the years that have been there. And, it's not like this is a story from one person. Actually, some guy was telling me about it in Denny's, and this other person was across the room and was like, I was fucking there too. You know what I mean? So it's like a really well-known thing that happened. So they went to play Here Comes Sunshine, and the clouds split just around the stadium. And these like white birds, I guess they were like storks or something, went flying into the ray of sunshine. And then when it was a 3-night run, and when the band played the last note of the last song, it started fucking dumping again. It literally just stopped for the 3-night run, and then it started dumping as soon as they walked off stage for the last night. And, I know a lot of people think this shit sounds batshit nuts, but it's not. And there are uncounted, and I've seen this so many times, and I've even experienced it from the stage before. It's a real thing. I've also seen Native American shaman call the wind and it actually blow. And it's not just me. There are anthropological records that talk about, Native Americans boiling water without a heat source and, all sorts of things along these lines. So it's a real phenomenon. In fact, the most intense and dramatic time that I ever witnessed this, I was at a Dark Star Orchestra concert, which is like fake Grateful Dead. They were at one point the world's greatest Grateful Dead cover band. In fact, they were the only ones on Earth for probably 20 years that were really able to recreate this stuff. And this was before I was really aware of the Grateful Dead in any kind of detail. I just thought it was like this weird old hippie band, and I didn't really care that much. And so we went to the All Good Festival in Spotsylvania, Virginia. And since then, I played with Dark Star Orchestra and actually got to discuss this with them and get the rest of the story, which was really remarkable. So where was I with this? So we get to the festival, and I brought my brother, who's not into this kind of music. I'm not into that kind of music, but something was telling me there's something here you need to understand. And so I was just driven by this intuitive kind of drive to go and figure out what in the hell is actually going on with this stuff. And so we arrive. It's crystal clear. There is no sign of rain coming. And we walk by this old man who says to us, the Grateful Dead used to make it rain when they played Looks Like Rain. And we just were like, whatever, old timer, go eat some more acid, just like wrote him off as an acid casualty and continued on to our tents. And so later we go down and, we split and ate the mushrooms, and we go down to the stage, and I remember what this old man said, and I look around, and there's stars. There's no sign of clouds. And so the band starts playing, and it's, way better than I would ever have imagined that it was going to be. True magic dripping from the whole entire set. But when they got to the end of the first set, and remember, I didn't know any of these songs at the time, so when they started Looks Like Rain, I didn't know it was that song. But then the first time he said, and it feels like rain, raindrops hit our face. And I look at my brother, and he looks at me, and our eyes are bugged out like no fucking way. And the thing about it is the Grateful Dead never repeated a set list in 30 years. They had over 1,000 songs, including all the covers they played over the years and all their side projects and everything. So the chances that they're going to play anything in particular on any given night are not very high. They don't just regurgitate their hits. Then the shows were literally a different set list every single night, which is really almost impossible to do. By the way, you guys, hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon, where you can join our secret streams. We actually got to meet a patron today. Gabby, if you're out there, it was really nice to meet you. We went down to Laguna Yani, where I set her up with a volunteer thing over in the jungle, and there was a baby squirrel monkey, and we got to play with it for like a couple hours while we were sitting around chatting. That video is in my shorts if you want to check it out. And we do have spots open for July retreats and November retreats. If you guys are interested in that, you can go to junglegnosis.com, or you can send me an email. The descriptions are all, or the stuff is all in the descriptions. All right, so the rain is coming down, and as the band builds up intensity, it's raining harder and harder and harder and harder and harder. And on the last beat of the song, that big like kaplam at the end, the big finale, this bolt of lightning shoots horizontally over the top of the crowd. For a second, I thought, man, I must have imagined that. And as soon as I had that thought, this woman leaned into my ear and was like, that was really close. And I was like, holy shit, it really happened. And the sky cracked open, the lights go out, and 20,000 people just walk back to our tents in total silence, because we were all young. We were all like 20-year-old kids, and we had all heard this shit from old Deadheads. And, we didn't know whether to believe it or not. But this Grateful Dead cover band had just managed to summon this energy and do this. And so many years later in the Catskills with Donna Jean Godchow, who was a Grateful Dead backup singer, in the audience, and Rob Baracco, who played with the Dead on keyboards, I got to sit in with Dark Star and play the song Dark Star. This is also kind of remarkable because I saw Dark Star 5 times and they never played Dark Star. And I always wondered, like, they named themselves after this song, do they not play it? And when I was going to go on stage with them, and I was talking to Rob Eaton, who plays the Bob Weir parts, looks like him, moves like him, acts like him, it's fucking weird. He actually produced Like a Virgin, so he's like a big shot studio gangster kind of character, on top of being, the world's best Bob Weir replica or whatever. And so we're talking. I'm like, hey, man, do you remember Spotsylvania, Virginia, all good, when the lightning and the rain, I told him what happened from my point of view, and he said, yeah, that fucking lightning bolt hit the stage and blew out a transformer right above my head. And I was like, damn, holy shit, I didn't know that part. And that's why they quit, actually. I just assumed it was just too stormy and they just couldn't do it. But they quit because that lightning bolt that went over my head actually hit the stage and blew out the transformer. So then I'm like, okay, so what do you want to play, Scarlet Begonias or something? And he's like, how about Dark Star? And probably my jaw fell off, because all those times that I had walked out of Dark Star shows wondering, when am I ever going to play this or hear this song, Dark Star, I'd be on the stage with Donna Jean Godchow and Rob Baracco from the Dead in the fucking audience, which was, there are no words, to to explain an experience like that. So that's, and that's like standard protocol, man. There's a few I think that are on video, like Widespread Panic did a show at Red Rocks, and he sings the word rainbow, and at that moment a rainbow forms behind the stage. And again, I don't think this guy is a sorcerer exactly. These bands all are into a certain lineage of occult practices, though, what we call the Western mysteries. You will find references and symbols of this stuff all over the artwork of the Grateful Dead, references to it in the lyrics of Phish, definitely saturated in Tool's music, their art, Danny Carey, the way he sets up his drums, and symbols are on this, you know what I mean? So there's more to it than just getting high and going and playing music, obviously. There's also this initiation into the secret mystery traditions of Egypt and Greece. And it's really ubiquitous throughout rock and roll. I mean, a lot of people know this at this point, but Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin bought Aleister Crowley's house. The Beatles put Aleister Crowley in the top left corner of Sgt. Pepper's. Hall and Oates, Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath, the song Mr. Crowley. Black Sabbath obviously heavily influenced in the lyrics. Metallica even references the things that will bite in the song Enter Sandman, which is a certain type of demon from the Goetia. Let's see. I know I'm missing a ton. I mean, just tons of them, all of them. If you can name a band that is like super mega gigantic huge and no one forgot about them, it's also related to the Gnostic tradition and Pink Floyd. The triangle with the light, the white light hitting it and coming out, that is from this tradition as well. And the reference to Gnosticism, their art company was called Hypnosis, but not HYP, HIP Gnosis, Hypnosis, like cool Gnosis. So all of these people have studied the same. David Bowie, I'm wearing Crowley's uniform. I'm moving closer to the golden dawn. Is one of David Bowie. Sting said he studied Crowley's stuff 5 hours a day. There's almost no one that is, and if you look at the Grateful Dead's philosophy of life, where they were saying, you cannot tell anyone else what to do no matter what. You have to do the thing that you love and nothing else all the time, or else you have failed at life. That is all. Do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under will. Right. It's thelemic. The Grateful Dead basically just adopted thelema as their modus operandi, and the rest is ongoing history somehow after like 60 years, which is absolutely mind-boggling to think about. So, and another interesting thing about this is that this kind of energy permeates the entire experience of being exposed to this music. A little while back, I mentioned that, that what happens is the audience entrains with the cycles of the consciousness of the band, and maybe it's also amplified by their vibrations in the music or whatever, but that was what I thought about the Grateful Dead, but I didn't go in my band and like tell the audience. I didn't sing about it. The Grateful Dead didn't sing about it. They sung about stories. That their message was nowhere in the music, and that's another bit of evidence of this unspoken telepathic communication, because the audience definitely understands something very specific that's being communicated by them, but there's no reference to it really. And one or two songs in the entire canon make direct reference to what they're actually doing. Ripple, sort of. The music plays the band, they say in one song, but mostly they totally avoid it deliberately as well. But so I was thinking that that's what happened, and then one day my bass player and I were leaving a gig, and this punk rock chick stopped us, and she's like, "Hey, can I tell you what you taught me about music tonight?" We're like, "Sure." And she's like, "Well, if the musicians have achieved a certain level of consciousness and they're playing it, you can, entrain with the consciousness of the people in the audience." And she explained to me what we were doing to him exactly the way I told people how the Grateful Dead works. It was staggering. And then a few days later, it happened again. This guy at the bar was like, "Hey man, can I buy you a beer?" I never understood the Grateful Dead until you guys were covering one of their songs the other day, and it's like this fucking portal opened up, and the whole audience became telepathic, and you know what I mean? Exactly the same story. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there that, this is something that happens with greater magnitude with somebody with an audience the size of the Grateful Dead, but it can happen anywhere. With anyone. And I imagine there's probably quite a few people that do this to a lesser extent roaming around. And if there's not, there should be. And I'm going back to the United States to try to start a band again because I'm sick of not doing this. Speaking of doing your true will, I don't know. I'm starting to feel like, what the hell am I doing sitting around in the jungle for years? I mean, what am I actually doing? Ayahuasca's awesome and helping people heal and all that's amazing, but I think I should go home and play some music. At any rate, though, we were about to go down another rabbit hole entirely, which is the fact that instances of synchronicity and telepathy and all this kind of weird stuff increase dramatically around this music. And that, I think, has something to do with underlying symmetry in the order, in the structure, the underlying structure of the universe. The symmetry, it's mathematical. Order comes from symmetry. And I think there are greater orders of symmetry that are imbued or integrated into like the fundamental fabric of our experience. And that's what synchronicity actually is. So I was going to see Tool for the second time at Red Rocks. And we went to pick up our car, and it was the wrong car. It was supposed to be a red Dodge Nitro, and instead it was a silver Mercury Mountaineer with the license plate TXZ666, and the odometer was 0.141414, and all of that is related to the occult lineage that Tool is all about. Aleister Crowley. His order was the Silver Star. The car was silver. He was a mountaineer. It was a mountaineer. His star was Mercury. It was a Mercury Mountaineer. His number was 666. THX, I think it was. Whatever it was, is also 666 in gematria. And it wasn't just us that noticed this. Once we parked that car at this Tool concert, people were walking by like, did you do that on purpose? Because people know this stuff, in that crowd. And no, we absolutely did not. But it gets significantly weirder. We were in two different cars, right? So we were in this Mercury Mountaineer, and we had another group that was in, I don't know what, a station wagon or something. And none of them used psychedelics at all. So you can't even invoke they must have been high because they didn't do anything. One of them was 15 even. Their kid was with them. So we're driving up there, and a bunch of crazy, like, next-level synchronicities happen just on the road. The Grateful Dead fans, for example, have come to associate the rainbow with the spirit of Jerry Garcia. And indeed, at their 50th reunion show in the Bay Area, a double rainbow formed behind the stage, and the only cloud in the Bay Area was right above the stage. You guys can check out pictures of that. The drummer started crying when he found out. And he grabbed the microphone and said, "You guys know what the fuck that is." It was insane, man. It was completely batshit fucking nuts to the point where Rolling Stone or Billboard magazine printed an article saying that the Grateful Dead had faked it because they called their lighting company and they said, "Did you guys do that with LEDs or something?" And the lighting company was sarcastic, and they're like, "Yeah." And so they printed it. And then the lighting company called them back after the story ran and said, "Hey, we were joking, you dipshit. You can't do that. You can't bend light somehow or dangle invisible LEDs in the sky." So they retracted the story, and the headline said, "Maybe the Grateful Dead actually does jam with God." So that was some remarkable shit to witness. But we were driving, and we were listening to the very last performance of one of the last songs that the Grateful Dead ever played. It was at the last show. And this is on the way to the Tool concert. And it's the only song where Garcia mentioned his ability to influence the weather. And by that tour in 1995, things had gotten totally out of control. People were flipping over cop cars. People were dying in the parking lot. The National Guard was called at like 7 shows because they became national disasters, or whatever the word is. National emergencies, or I don't remember how to say it, but you know what I mean. It was a fucking mess. And so... So the line was, "I thought I heard a jug band playing from over on the far side of the hill. If you don't, who else will?" And the Grateful Dead actually started as a jug band. And if you just tell the story in shorthand that jug band takes LSD, makes $1 billion, and changes the world, it sounds like the stupidest thing, you know what I mean? But that's literally what happened. And then he says, "But the wind don't blow and the rain don't fall, and you no longer hear me when I call." And then he starts talking about going to heaven. And he died like a week later or something, like a month later, August 9th or something like that. So we had just finished listening to that. Everybody is in tears in the car because it was such a powerful performance. And I said, "That's the last we saw of him." And we turned the corner, and there was this massive, supernatural-looking fucking rainbow across the desert. And everyone got it. We're like, what the fuck? So we get to the show, and we park the Crowley mobile. And, like I said, there's people walking by, and they're going like, "Did you do that on purpose?" I'm like, "No, I just rented it." And there's more to the Crowley story, but I'm not going to get into all that. I have videos that are already on the channel about that if you're interested in my Crowley stories. So then I said to one of the guys that was with us, "I'm going to make synchronicity happen right now." I'm going to like do it deliberately. And I just walked away, and this guy came out of a bathroom stall with a sign around his neck that said applied synchronicity. So I just grabbed him and drove him over to my group of friends. And this dude starts talking like he knew exactly where our heads were, like all this really specific. It was fucking insane. And then they tell me, because we had just met up at this point, right? And then they're like, no, dude, you don't understand what happened on the way here. And I was like, what? And they're like, well, we were driving along, and Clint said he was the singer in my band at the time. He said to his wife, stop being such a 311 or something, 331, some weird number thing. And she's like, what? And she said his eyes got all big, and he goes, I have no idea why I just said that. And then they said they got to the gas station, and they were going to walk in the door, and this homeless guy opens the door, and he's like, come on in, 311s. And they're like, 331, actually. It was 331. And they're like, what the fuck? They all heard it. And then they got to their hotel room, and it was room 331. And then somebody asked Chris what time it was, and he's like, it's 331. And this shit just constantly, like the whole rest of the trip up there, all these weird manifestations of this number, which in numerology signifies that your holy guardian angels are looking out for you or some kind of shit like that. But yeah, and then of course the entire concert, after the concert back at this girl, Aunt Ra, we were all about Ra and the sun god and studying Egypt at the time. And we go to our friend's house after the Tool concert, and her aunt's name is actually Aunt Ra. So my point basically is that once you get like really dialed into this, and you have the filters in your consciousness down, if you can handle it, they stay down. And your experience of life, I think, just becomes much more deep, much more rich. There's a it's much easier to come into homeostasis with your experience because of the greater order of symmetry that you are now acutely aware of. Yeah. If I come back to the USA, it will definitely be California. I see there's 12 of you guys and 6 likes. Please smash the like button. I'm demonetized, so I get no support. The algorithm doesn't push my content, so I really appreciate it if you guys make it look good by putting likes on there, because it's all grassroots, my channel. And you can also support us by sending money to the options in the chat or joining Patreon. And also, I'm doing live music performances that I think are getting better and better all the time, more and more diverse. Once or twice, maybe 3 times a week, because I'm in fundraiser mode, because we are moving the final rounds of our retreat in November near Yasuni, which is the most biodiverse place on Earth. It has pink river dolphins and 22 species of monkey and just 3 different tribes, and it's just going to be completely off the chain insane. But it's going to be expensive for us to arrange. So I'm definitely in fundraiser mode at the moment. How can you get hooked up with these cats? I'm not sure which cats you are referencing. Let's see. Okay, I forgot another really, really famous instance that you might be able to find video of on YouTube, where Phish at Red Rocks, again, Red Rocks also seems to be a hot spot for like this weird preternatural kind of experience. And I don't call it supernatural because it's not. No matter how far your filters go down, you are never going to experience anything impossible. All of these things, it's like the experiences can go right to the boundary of impossible, but they won't actually go over it. One of the things I didn't mention about this conversation I had with Danny Carey from Tool is that just in order to prove to myself and a couple of friends, one of whom I brought with me, that your mind could do this kind of thing, I basically just drove right to him because I decided I wanted to talk to him. It's just a matter, I think, of having an awareness of the symmetry of the greater order of symmetry in the universe. In fact, Maynard James Keenan from Tool also said that when he was asked about Fear Inoculum, because he, the title track is about a pandemic, and then it also is about people becoming afraid of each other and distancing themselves from each other because of fear. and it came out like 6 months before the pandemic, and this isn't the first time he's done that. So, people were obviously asking him in interviews, what in the fuck is going on with this? And he said, you really don't have to invoke woo to understand how this happens. It's just that the subconscious mind is aware of these patterns that exist, and it's able to sort of process them into the future. And it's extremely accurate in some cases for certain people some of the time. These experiences are not consistent for me. I don't claim to be like consistently telepathic or to experience precognition all the time or whatever, but it certainly happens fairly regularly. And another interesting thing about this, the reports of people that experience this thing, if they're being honest and not doing it for a living, I think, is that it's not something that you can make happen. It's almost as if there is some kind of mediator that is deciding when you can have access to this information, when it's relevant to you, or I don't know exactly what the explanation is. But the Grateful Dead, Tool, myself, the guys in Phish, like everyone that I'm aware of that talks about this in association with music, says the same thing, that it's not really something you can do deliberately. It's more like something that just sort of happens automatically. And the telepathy aspect of it with psychedelics actually goes all the way back to ayahuasca. And I mean, like, way back in the day, the records of people like Sir Walter Raleigh, and ethnobotanists and other explorers who would interview shaman that knew about the Great Pyramids and street corners in China and whatever, that they had definitely never left the jungle, like no possibility of that. Never encountered outsiders, and just no way that they had this information without using ayahuasca. And I think that what happens there is that at a high enough dose, there is a sort of non-locality that is conferred upon your consciousness. Our absurdly narrow vantage point of a single ego is temporarily expanded. The inhibitors are deactivated, and so you can actually become completely dislodged and then sort of just travel around on the net of consciousness. If you guys have seen Tool's video Parabola, when the light being at the end dissolves into the white latticework matrix behind it, that's what that's supposed to be. Alex and Allison Gray, who are the artists, well, Alex is the artist behind that art. They claim that they took a super high dose of LSD once and dissolved into that lattice work. I've talked to a lot of people that also make that claim. I've never had the balls to eat an entire sheet of LSD. I'm too big. I think I would want to have a couple of like really large people around just in case things went south. So I can't necessarily attest to that, although I am, because of all these other experiences that I've had, I'm pretty confident that it's a real thing, and it would be light, because the source of our consciousness is very obviously light. There's really no other possible culprit, because there's only two things in the universe: light and void. All matter is light in a standing wave, and then there's light illuminating it, and then there's void. So this is, again, another great occult secret hidden in plain sight. When the old, Middle Ages guys would draw a face on the sun, there's references to it. Jesus said, "I am the light of this world, the sun." I mean, he was like really clearly trying to tell them that he was only an allegory for the sun and not an actual person. Interestingly, also, the sun, because our consciousness and functions, I think we're connected to it. The radio receiver for our consciousness, and the reason that we can pick up other people's thoughts and respond to vibrations in the way that we do, that have nothing to do with our ears. The brain is loaded with a mineral called magnetite. And so this kind of establishes the relationship between consciousness and the electromagnetic wave. The sun is extraordinarily dense, and it would indeed concentrate tremendous amounts of this light energy for obvious reasons. I mean, we don't really need to unpack that, do we? I mean, so that's, you know, another one of the secrets in this music that is very thinly veiled. The idea that our being is emanated, that it's actually the soul of the sun that we are receiving, basically, that animates us. The sun is SOL, and if you add U to U as in you, you know, but just make it the letter U and put it in that SOL, and you have your soul. This stuff is it's not happenstance. I don't know that it's deliberate either. It's just that greater order of symmetry imposing a higher level of order on creation. But there's this great... Okay, so the original Lucifer myth, right? Lucifer means light bearer, and it's actually just a reference to the electromagnetic wave that bears the light. And so the original Lucifer myth was that Lucifer was the highest angel, and he had a harp in his chest with no strings on it that played directly telepathically into the mind of God. I probably don't need to point out that we've been talking about these bands that are playing music that operates on a telepathic level, right? So there's that weird consistency in the story. But there's a Grateful Dead song that starts out, and remember, so here's the premise. Our consciousness comes to us from the sun, which is really what's emanating our soul, and it plays its music on a harp with no strings. So if my words did glow with the gold of sunshine, and my tunes were played on the harp unstrung, would you hear my voice come through the music? Would you hold it near as it were your own? So that's clearly a reference to this knowledge of the solar source of our consciousness, and also the Lucifer myth. And the fact that our consciousness is coming from this light bearer, basically. So, and that's just one example. There are tons and tons and tons of these references to blue shimmering lights. If you watch the Tool video that I just made, there's a lot of information about all this, but I actually need to jump off of here and have some psilocybin and listen to some music. So thank you guys so much for spending this time with me. I hope this was enlightening. Please do support us and hit the like button, share the videos, and I will see you again very, very soon.